I wrote a book in 2011 called Best Practices Are Stupid. And it was basically 40 different ways, 40 different strategies for innovating. Everybody in innovation says you need to think outside the box. Don't think outside the box. Find a better box. Innovation isn't about ideas, quantity of ideas. It's not even about creativity. It's about relevance.
2 weeks prior to the launch of your book, Pivotal, you used a beautiful analogy of a basketball player.
There's a move in basketball called the pivot, which is, again, the same term that we use in business. And in basketball, there is a foot that is basically moving around in circles. It is the change in direction. So we're constantly changing our strategy, spinning around in circles. Now, here's the thing which is fascinating, though, is when people talk about a pivot in business, they're always focused on the foot that's moving. The purpose of being pivotal is to focus on that planted foot, the foot that doesn't move, the foot that gives you stability, the foot that gives you that foundation so that when you do have to shift, you're coming from a place of power rather than shifting on quicksand.
Life happens. People struggle with midlife crisis. How can we handle that?
I don't believe that you need to have a midlife crisis. A midlife crisis comes from somebody who's not been connected to their planted foot and they've not had the right experiences. So if somebody's only done the same thing over and over and over again, well, the grass always looks greener somewhere else. Somebody says, I've got 30 years of experience. It's like, no, you've got 1 year of experience 30 times over. Sometimes it's hard for us to be objective about what makes us distinctive.
For as long as you can identify that differentiated factor for yourself, you'll be able to sail through. If it's that simple, where is the challenge?
My belief is we need to meander with purpose. We let life unfold and then have an experience. I have that experience. I ask myself, is this moving me in the direction that I want, or do I need to change course slightly?
Hey, Stephen, such a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much, my friend, for being on our show, The X-Monks Drive.
It's really my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Pleasure is all mine, Steve. I've had the privilege of knowing you for a couple of years now. And in all our conversations, there's so much of richness that I get. So thank you so much for making such a great contribution to the world of innovation, to the world of it's so phenomenal. Thank you.
Well, thank you. When we speak, there's something that comes up that I've never would talk about with someone else. So that's what I'm hoping we have today, is some surprising conversation where it goes in places neither of us expected.
I'm sure. I think that's the beauty of when you get in conversations with your friends, where you can find a confidant in them, where you're willing to let go of your guards and where you experience psychological safety.
Yes.
So Stephen, last week, you have launched your 7th book, Pivotal. I found that subject quite fascinating for a couple of reasons. You have written 7 books. I mean, when did you develop that love for yourself, where you said to yourself that you should start writing books? Not 1, not 2, not 3, 7 books. Tell me about that journey for yourself.
Well, it's funny. I never really thought of myself as an author or a writer. And in fact, in college, I would say that English was probably one of my worst subjects. But for me, it was less about the written word and more about communication, because one of the things I loved was speaking. And so I was fortunate enough when I was working at Accenture, I had an opportunity to work closely with someone who was a world-renowned speaker and author. And it was his books that really created the platform for his speaking. So what I realized is if I want to be on stages and sharing my message with the world, having a book would probably be a good idea. So what was nice is I was leading this 20,000 person innovation practice at Accenture. And when you lead such a large group, publishers do take notice. And I was approached by a major publisher to do a book. And I wrote my first book in 2001. And basically the day the book came out was my last day with Accenture. And I launched my own business at that point. So the book was the catalyst for everything else. There are some people who are really authors and they write books and they make a living off of their books. For me, books are a way of getting the message out so people become more interested in bringing me in to do other work, which is really where my passion lies.
One of the books that I picked up, which is Invisible Solutions, 25 lenses that reframe and help solve difficult business problems. I found this book quite fascinating. And what else would you expect when Daniel Pink is endorsing this book. He says that by enlisting Shapiro's 25 lenses, you will see your business problems more clearly. Tell me, what was the idea behind writing this book?
So I lose track of the numbers of books, but I wrote a book in 2011 called Best Practices Are Stupid. And it was basically 40 different ways, 40 different strategies for innovating. And one of them was called Don't Think Outside the Box, Find a Better Box. Because everybody in innovation says you need to think outside the box. And the problem is the brain actually does like constraints. The issue is we tend to have the wrong constraints. So if we can get a better box, the right size box focused on the right opportunities, we will actually drive higher levels of value. And so in Best Practices Are Stupid, that was one of 40 chapters. Now, people liked a lot of the different concepts, but people read that one chapter and said, that's great. I understand I need to ask better questions. I need to take what I thought was the problem and reframe it. How do I do that? And so what I decided to do was immediately start researching and gathering stories and examples of problems that somebody thought was the original problem. And by changing it, they came up with something different. So I came up with a spreadsheet which had like 150 different examples and stories and lenses for reframing. I kept that for about a decade. And then I decided, well, it's about time to write a book. I'm not going to do 150 lenses. So I chose the 25 most powerful lenses and put them in the book. And that's how it came about. It was just going deep into one of 40 chapters.
Yeah. Stephen, in your experience, what are the myths that people have around innovation? Because somewhere I read an article where the author created a beautiful distinction between features and novelty. As per your understanding, what are the myths that people have about this term called innovation?
Well, I think the first thing is we don't even agree on a definition of innovation. So I think that's part of the issue. It's like saying, well, what's your thoughts on Fred? Well, what's a Fred? You know, we don't have an aligned language with it. So the first thing is to make sure we understand what innovation is, why we do it, and what we're trying to achieve. And from my perspective, innovation isn't about ideas, quantity of ideas. It's not even about creativity. It's about relevance. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that what we do as an organization is relevant. That is, it creates the greatest value in the way that our customers want value. And I think a lot of times the biggest myth is we need lots of ideas. We want everybody's opinions and suggestions. And that's not innovation. That's just spending a lot of time talking to people and maybe getting a lot of useless information. So how can we laser focus on what matters most? And that's really what my work is all around, is identifying what are the most important opportunities. And then once you understand those, how do we frame those opportunities in a way that we can unleash the greatest value? So it's not about, you know, ideas and quantity and solutions. It really is about questions and opportunities.
Yeah. This is quite fascinating because the different subjects that I dig my head in, be it design thinking, coaching, mentoring, and now innovation, as you're talking about, or there's something that I've been working on with somebody on data analytics or business analytics. One of the common theme which is emerging is the quality of the question that you ask. And what does a question do to a human mind? That's it's extremely important for a leader to understand.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people right now, especially in the age of AI, understand the importance of questions. I mean, there's a whole world of what's called prompt engineering, which is the questions that we ask ChatGPT or whatever AI engine. And if we don't ask the right question, we will get irrelevant information. So it is about the question. Everything comes down to the question. The answers are, in the scheme of things, easier to find. But if it's the wrong question, it doesn't matter whatever solution we develop. So it is really critical. And what a lot of people don't think about is the power of language. Like we can change one word in a question and it unleashes a completely different emotional relationship to it, a completely different set of possible solutions. Even if we talk about, I have problems versus I have opportunities. One word, okay, opportunity is sort of like, okay, well, this is great. I have an opportunity to do something. A problem seems like it's something that needs to be fixed, like it's something we need to get rid of, but maybe they're not problems. Maybe they're just opportunities to improve. And that's a again, one word can really change the language.
One of my teachers, he often says that what you are talking about, the importance and the power of words. He says, the moment you look at something and the moment you call it a problem, it would create a sense of caution in you that would lead to anxiety. On the other hand, if you call something a possibility, the word that comes to your mind would be conscientiousness and the possibilities. And that shifts everything. So on one hand, the anxiety is getting created. On the other hand, the possibilities are getting created. It's just a matter of choosing the right word. Since we are talking about the importance of choosing the right language, we are talking about the importance of questions and how they come together. When you wrote a book called Pivotal, why? Tell me the context behind Pivotal. I would want my audience to understand this concept because there are so many people that I get to interact with. They talk about midlife crisis. And I think from that lens, if I look at, this is one of the most important concepts that an individual needs to understand.
So the content in Pivotal is content I've been using with my clients for literally decades. So the frameworks, the concepts, they've all been proven with literally hundreds and hundreds of companies. But the reason why I wrote the book, it wasn't a book I expected to write, but the reason why I wrote it is during the pandemic, what ended up happening was everybody started pivoting. 2020 was the year of pivoting and everybody's changing direction. We can't go to the restaurant, so the restaurant needs to come to us through food delivery. And so every company and every industry was spinning around in circles. And what happened was when I looked at the leadership inside of organizations, the leaders were confused. What's an opportunity? What's a distraction? What should we focus on and what should we ignore? What's noise? And when I looked at the employees, I saw that people were confused. They were stressed. They were burned out. They didn't know what to do because they were getting conflicting information almost on a daily basis. So what I realized is there was never clarity of what matters most. And companies, when it comes to innovation, are always so focused on what's next and new. They never really focused on what's now. Like, what do we do now that we can leverage? And they're always focused on what's going to change and what should change rather than asking what will never change, what shouldn't change, what do we leverage that we do better than anyone else in the world today that will create the greatest value. And so basically this book was trying to be the antidote for the perpetual pivoting that so many companies were doing. And just to be clear, the word pivotal, we chose that intentionally because it's a play on the word pivot, but pivoting basically means to spin around in circles. Pivotal means to be irreplaceable or of crucial importance. And I love that concept of like, what if you were irreplaceable? Like your customers could go nowhere else to get what you offer. What if you were of crucial importance in a way that they had to work with you? It wasn't a matter of choice. You were the only option. That's the concept of being pivotal. Words are similar. Again, it's the language, the same 5 letters, P-I-V-O-T, but it's the last letters that become really critical.
If you permit, I would like to look at this book through the lens of a leader who is struggling to find their life purpose, who's struggling to find what their core strengths are, and then the struggle begins. So let's start from the first point. How can one identify one's life's purpose, life's work, if I may call it, and when they start to struggle in the organization, how can they pivot with the same life's work and yet continue to stay relevant?
So in the book, there's a number of different frameworks. One of them is called the 5 Ds of differentiation. And really the key premise of the book is you want to innovate where you differentiate. That's sort of somewhat unique, that creates the greatest amount of value and that others couldn't copy or replicate. And if you can really focus on that, now you know where to put your energy. And I would call that at some level your calling, your purpose, your why. And we'll just deconstruct the first 3 Ds because when it comes to an individual, I think the first 3 Ds are really important. And the first D is sort of the different and differentiating, which is distinctive. Basically, it's what makes you different. And it's your life's work. I mean, everything you do. So it's not just that I'm an innovation person, but I'm also a magician. I'm also a musician. And I have certain interests. I also have particular styles. All those things together make me distinctive. But just because I love magic doesn't mean it creates value. So the second D is desirable. And there's two aspects to being desirable. There is the externally desirable, which means the world values it, they want it, and they want it in the way that I offer it. But there's also an internally desirable. I have to love it. It has to be something I really enjoy doing. So those are the first two Ds, but there's three facets to it. It has to be my somewhat unique combination of things that make me distinctive. The world must value it, which is the external desirability. And it must be something I'm really excited about and passionate about, because that's the only way I can deliver it as powerfully as possible. And that's internal desirability. And then the next D would be durable. And durable basically means it's going to stand the test of time and would be difficult for others to replicate. Now, for example, in the world of AI, what makes me distinctive might have to shift over time, because AI is going to start doing things that I'm good at. Okay, great. Well, then how do I remain distinctive when AI can do some of the things I do? So my competition isn't just other innovation experts and speakers and authors, but technology is my competition also. So when I look at the combination of distinctive, externally desirable, internally desirable, and durable, I then get that center of gravity that tells me this is where I should be investing my energies. Now there are times when we need to shift. And the fourth D is dynamic. And basically that just means that we need to acknowledge that the world does change. What was desirable yesterday may not be desirable tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And therefore I might need to make adjustments. But as long as I can stay true to my core, I think that's really the key.
Yeah. So Stephen, let me share this thing. So you spoke about three Ds, right? You should be distinctive. You should be desirable, both internal and external. And the third thing that you spoke about is the durable. Now, I'm sure you have come across individuals who are saying yes to all three. They are distinctive, and yet they are struggling to work in the corporate environment that they are a part of. Might be the environment is not supportive. And there, this individual is struggling to find the next move. And that is the time when there are chances that an individual will take a decision which is not in alignment to his or her life's work. What are the parameters that one needs to be reminded?
Well, in that situation, I'm not even sure I'd call that a pivot. I would think that's a recentering. Because if somebody's in the wrong environment, they never had a solid differentiator. They weren't desirable externally. Now, externally doesn't have to be customers. It could be your employer. You need to be desirable for what you offer them. So if you think of yourself as an employee and in a corporate environment, you need to do something different than other people, because if you're the same as everyone else, you're just a commodity. What you offer has to be something that the company values. Your supervisor, your boss, your team, your department, they have to value it. And again, it has to be something that's durable, and you have to love it. So I would say that finding the right environment isn't a pivot. That's a realignment with who you already are and should be. What I will say, though, is in some cases, like as an entrepreneur, I can have those Ds. I can be doing my great work, but I'm still not selling. Well, then we come down to the fifth D, which is disseminate, which basically means you can have all those other pieces, but if you're the world's best kept secret, you're not going to be successful. So we need to make sure that not only do we work on ourselves, but we need to make sure our message gets out there. As an employer and as an employee, we need to make sure people understand what makes us distinctive. A lot of times our bosses don't even know us. They may have seen like our resume, but their resume doesn't tell you the depth and breadth of our life experiences. So you need to disseminate it. You need to share it. You need to make sure everybody understands it. And just as you want to innovate where you differentiate, you want to sell where you differentiate. Focus on the things which really are unique to you, that the world values, that's going to be hard for somebody else to replicate, and make sure you communicate that message everywhere all the time.
I think that is what is going to be your anchor, right? Your values, your uniqueness, what you have to offer in an organization. It could be your style, it could be your communication, it could be your ability to connect with people. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that it's not just our past work experiences, but we are very complex. And so what we need to do is make sure we're bringing everything to the table. How does my love of magic help me as a speaker? How does my love of music help me as a speaker? So for example, one of the things which, to come back to the distinctive aspect, sometimes it's hard for us to be objective about what makes us distinctive.
Precisely.
We might think,
you
yes,
are too close to that. You can't even see what makes you who you are. Yeah.
exactly. So sometimes you need an outside perspective. So I hired a company and I said, here's 20 of my clients. I'm not going to tell them what you're about to do. You go through your process. And they basically asked, what makes me distinctive and desirable? So they focused on those two. And we found there were 4 attributes. And I could really, they resonated with me because it's like, yeah, that is who I am. So when it came time to marketing and branding and messaging and communicating, I focused on those 4 principles more than all the other things. I focused on what is of value to my customers and what is valued by my customers, which are 2 different things.
Yeah. You know, I call it, in my definition, I call it expression. What is your true expression? And if it's not in alignment to your core gifts and your superpower, you would falter. And the moment you've been able to identify your true expression, you can just blossom in the world. The challenge is, Stephen, we find, at least I find it extremely difficult to find my true expression. I know a couple of areas where I'm good at, be it extracting wisdom from my guest and to share that, as you said, disseminate it with the world. That's what I do. Is there any formula or a code that you have been able to decode, Stephen, that could help people find what makes them who they are?
So there's 2 different schools of thought on this. One school of thought is it is something which you can analyze and intellectualize. And so when I hired the company to identify what makes me distinctive, they did that. And it was great, very useful. But at my core, so I've spent 30 years focused on innovation. There's no way in the world that someone could have told me innovation was going to be my passion. It was going to be my life's work. That only came through an experience. And so one of the things which I really do believe, and there's a quote from Steve Jobs who said, creative people are so because they've had more experiences than other people. Basically, creativity is just about collecting and connecting dots. And creative people have had more experiences or they've thought more about their experiences than other people. And I think that's really critical is we can't just sit on our butts and say, this is what makes me special. This is what I love. The only way to do it is to get out there and actually try things, see what works, see what doesn't work. I mean, one of my books, I'll just show this book, which is called Goal-Free Living. Now, the purpose of Goal-Free Living was to recognize that when we have goals, goals are set based on the past. And we can't always figure out where we want to be in 5 years, 10 years from now, because we have such a limited amount of information. So we need to get out there and play, seek out adventure, try new things, and not worry about how they turn out. And so I ended up in innovation, not because I sat down and said, what's the next hot topic, but rather I had an experience, a profound experience on a project that shifted the way I saw the world.
Such a beautiful way of explaining this, Stephen. Thank you so much. And thank you for not putting this in a box, because otherwise I would have continued to look at that code and then struggle. Instead, what you're saying is, if only I can have more experiences and if only I'm willing to have more experiments in my life, I would be able to find my life's work through finding what I'm really good at, where I struggle, what people appreciate, what I have to offer, and if it's desirable. Stephen, last time when we had a conversation, in fact, was 2 weeks prior to the launch of your book, Pivotal. You used a beautiful analogy of a basketball player, where it's very important to have a planted foot and you can always move. If you can just help me with that one more time.
Sure. So I always have with me, for those who are watching the video, I've actually got a basketball in front of me, and it's purple because the cover of all my books are purple. But the point of the basketball is that there's a move in basketball called the pivot, which is, again, the same term that we use in business. And in basketball, there is a foot that is basically moving around in circles. It is the change in direction. And if you think about business, we're always focused on the shift. Anytime we talk about a pivot, it's the foot that's moving. Okay, the pandemic hit. We need to shift our strategy. Inflationary issues. We need to shift our strategy. Supply chain problems. We need to shift again. So we're constantly changing our strategy, spinning around in circles. Now, here's the thing which is fascinating, though, is when everybody's watching a pivot, and when people talk about a pivot in business, they're always focused on the foot that's moving. They almost never realize that there's one foot that is firmly planted to the ground. You can't have a powerful pivot if both feet are moving.
Yeah.
And the issue that I see from most companies right now is when they're executing pivots in business, both feet are moving and they're moving aimlessly. So the purpose of being pivotal is to focus on that planted foot, the foot that doesn't move, the foot that gives you stability, the foot that gives you that foundation, so that when you do have to shift, you're coming from a place of power rather than shifting on quicksand, which is what most companies are doing right now.
Metaphorically, what could be that planted foot for a leader?
So for a leader of an organization, and everything from my perspective comes down to identifying what makes your organization differentiated. And the differentiation comes from those 5 Ds. And so if you focus on that, that becomes really important. But one of the things which I think is so critical, though, is, first of all, being differentiated is not the same as being different. There's a lot of companies that are different, but they're not desirable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need to recognize that being differentiated is typically not a product, service, or offering. Because if we think about that durable aspect, if you are a product-centric company, the odds of somebody being able to copy, replicate, duplicate, and improve your product, it's amazing. So if we take Apple, for example, every year, Apple releases a new iPhone. The iPhone is not what differentiates them, but it's internal capabilities. It's their design. It's their interconnectivity with iCloud and all of their devices. So it's not the product, but it's rather capabilities and networks that make them distinctive. And I think that's just really important for everybody to understand, is it's very rarely the product.
And for an individual, what could that be? If you can just share one such example from your life where you pivoted.
So when I left Accenture, my goal was to be a professional speaker. And I would travel the world giving speeches on stages. And what I realized is that's limiting. So one of the things you need to do to be pivotal is also to recognize that our language impacts the value we can create. So one of the best ways to become pivotal is to add more value. So one of the questions I always ask myself is, okay, I'm not changing direction. I'm still an innovation person. I'm still a communicator, but how can I add more value? And what I realized is if all I do is give 1-hour speeches on 50 different stages every year, that's limiting the value I can create. So what can I do to leverage all the things that make me special, make me distinctive, and use those to create more value for my clients? And so, yes, I still give speeches, but I also have, for example, what I call my Fast Innovation Mastery Program, which is an apprenticeship program where people take the concepts that I would have talked about on the stage, but they master it. It's an apprenticeship program where I work with them and we solve their real world important problems. And in the process of doing that, they're able to do it for any problem in the future. So that's how I try to be pivotal, is to create as much value for the right customers by planting that foot and going deeper. It's about depth, not changing direction, but it's like
Just
even going
for my
deeper with that planted
understanding and
foot.
for the understanding of our audience, Stephen, what I'm listening is that as an individual, it's very important for me to understand and find the common thread in the 10 different things that I've experimented with in my life in the past. That has yielded phenomenal returns for myself and for the organization that I work with, that I've been associated with. If I can identify what are those one or two traits that I have to offer, which is very unique to me, that allows myself, that allows my team, that allows the organization to deliver on results, can I call that as my anchor, as my planted foot?
Absolutely. Your planted foot would be the 5 Ds. And when you understand that, now you use one of the other frameworks, which basically is all around innovating where you differentiate. So you're not going to be great at everything. If you try to be great at everything, you'll be great at nothing. So if you can go deep into what you're spectacular at, that the world values, that you love doing, that others can't replicate, and you go deep into that, well, that becomes your planted foot. And it's something which shouldn't change very much over time. Now, what we use to create, or what we create through that planted foot, might shift over time, but it should be pretty solid. And that to me is the key, whether you're an employee, whether you are an entrepreneur, or even in your personal life.
Yeah.
You know, the concepts apply everywhere.
Yeah. You know, Stephen, what I'm picking up is it's very important for you to find your true strength, identify your true core values, and start to operate from that space. As long as you can identify that differentiated factor for yourself, you'll be able to sail through. If it's that simple, why don't people do it? I mean, where is the challenge?
So I think there's a few different challenges. One is it's hard for us to look at ourselves that way. So again, sometimes we do need an outside perspective. Sometimes we think we can analytically come up with a solution, but my belief is we need to meander with purpose. It's an expression I love that I wrote about in Goal for Living. Meandering with purpose basically says we shouldn't have a specific destination, but rather we need a sense of direction. And then we meander with purpose. We let life unfold, and then I have an experience. And after I have that experience, I ask myself, is this moving me in the direction that I want? Or do I need to change course slightly? And here's what's fascinating is when you meander with purpose, you get to a better place, which is often different than the place you thought you were going to get to. So we need those outside perspectives, but at the same time, we need more experiences, because our experiences are going to help us move in that direction. In a lot of cases, we just have a limited old expression. It's like somebody says, I've got 30 years of experience. It's like, no, you've got 1 year of experience 30 times over. It's the same thing each and every time. That's not 30 years of experience. That's just having one experience. What if you had 30 different experiences? You know, so that's the great thing about, for example, I come from a consulting background. I got to work with so many clients in so many different industries with so many different challenges during consulting, and now in my own business, the same thing. And I'm always connecting the dots. How can I take something from healthcare and apply it to hospitality? What can we do in technology and apply it to retail? All these different connections, that's where some of the greatest innovations come from. But you have to have a lot of experiences in order to be able to do that.
One thing is, as you mentioned, it's very important to find your core anchor. And now what you're talking about is meandering with your purpose. And just imagine the life would be so beautiful, because I know I'm meandering with my purpose, and I'm only doing things that helps me to connect with my core values. And of course, I will deliver results. At the same time, life happens. People struggle in midlife crisis. How can we handle that? How can we bring in these two concepts together? Meandering with purpose, finding your planted foot, and yet deal with the situation, what we call as midlife crisis.
No, I think in a lot of cases, a midlife crisis comes from somebody who's not been connected to their planted foot, and they've not had the right experiences. So if somebody's only done the same thing over and over and over again, well, the grass always looks greener somewhere else. I could be doing this. And you get to a point where you say, you know what? I want to live the youth I never had. But if you were always true to yourself each and every day, if you lived your life and had those experiences and really understood who you are deeply, and you applied them to every decision you make, I don't believe that you need to have a midlife crisis. I think it's just because we haven't really taken that reflective time to understand our planted foot, yet still have a wide variety of experiences. And I want to be clear, when I say meandering with purpose, that doesn't invalidate the planted foot. You're still changing direction, but we're not spinning around in circles. We're doing minor corrections based on new information. And that's really one of the keys of innovation is it's called iterative development. Build it, try it, fix it. Do something, see how it works, learn from it, and move in a new direction. And when we're dealing with the unknown, that concept is incredibly powerful. So we need to balance, though, some level of what's known and what's unknown. And we get that right balance, then we're going to be very powerful.
Yeah. So let me just take a dive into knowing Stephen's life a bit. Stephen, my assumption is one of your planted foot is your ability to look at innovation, your ability to speak, your ability to write something on 24/7, something around goalless living, something around invisible solutions, and then pivotal. What were those unknowns that at one point in time you had to deal with? And what emerged out of that Stephen of today is proud of?
I think that the key for me has always been moving forward, not knowing how things are going to turn out. So one of the principles of goal-free living is to remain detached. And that basically means we might have a concept of what we'd like to achieve, but in the process of focusing on that end game and that goal, in a lot of cases, it creates tension. And that tension actually will prevent us from achieving it. So look, expectation is the source of pretty much all dissatisfaction. And I'm not saying don't have expectations, but if you live life through I have to get this result for me to take this step, you're never going to live life fully. So I think that's one of the things which I've done is did I know how to publish books? No. And each of my books have been published in different ways by different publishers, different publishing strategies. And I would just keep on trying. And was everything a success? No. I mean, there's a lot of things I did which didn't go the way I wanted, but it wasn't the end of the world. And I think that, to me, when I look at it, is I ended up in a place that I didn't expect to be, but I couldn't envision where I am now 20 years ago. I had to live all of my life's experiences in order to get there.
Isn't this so beautiful, Stephen, as you said, that it's very important. An innovator is somebody, a creative person is somebody who's able to connect the dots. Stephen, if you were to give a piece of advice to your 20-year-old self, what would that be?
I would use one word: trust. Trust that it's all going to work out if you do the work. And again, it comes down to, we do things in order to get a particular outcome. People write books because they want to make money. They outreach to people because they want to make a sale. And what I've really tried to do is shift away from a future-oriented goal to trusting that if I'm doing the right thing today, it will produce the right results in the future. So when I reach out to people, it is never to sell something. I give things away. The more value I can give, my hope is that at some point they will see the value and want to hire me. But it's trusting that if you are of service and that if you're not attached to the outcome, it will work out.
Thank you so much, Stephen. This is an absolute delightful conversation. And trust me, I did not expect this conversation to go in this direction. I thought that we would talk about strategies. I thought we would talk about the processes and the systems and the organization and the leader needs to adapt. But least did I expect that we would talk about the basics like detachment, basics like meandering, having a meandering purpose for yourself. Stephen, an absolute joy talking to you, my friend. As I said, it has always been a joy.
Well, thank you. The pleasure was really all mine. And I look forward to the next conversation. Who knows where that one's going to go?
Looking forward. Take care. Stay blessed. See you
Take
soon.
care. Thank you.